All right, so let's get into this week's session. I think that the first session we'll start off with this week is a topic that's been hit a lot in the news media and throughout the country, and that is the topic of body-worn cameras. I think it's a great topic to talk about, a great session for us to talk about. So let's get into it and discuss what's going on in the law enforcement world with body-worn cameras. So I'm going to tell you that I don't want to say I'm the leading authority in the campus safety world, body-worn cameras, but I'm definitely in the top five to discuss it. I've ran presentations for over 400 or 500 campus police chiefs on this. We've done some studies with campus chiefs on this, and so I think that what you're going to see in this presentation is just some surveys I've done of people, some conversations I've had with people to discuss what they're doing with their body-worn cameras and where they're at with that. So let's talk about four agencies that I looked at that we can kind of use as a gauge. And the reason I looked at them was for campus size. So Dan Williams over at Midwestern State University, they have about 5,000 people in their community. They have 10 police officers, and they use a WatchGuard cop view, which is the same thing as the ViView or VView camera system, but it's just what they call privately labeled. So that's an interesting thing to talk about. So some of these cameras are exactly the same. They just have different names, like this WatchGuard Cop View. WatchGuard Cop View is ViView, but privately labeled. Troy Lane, University of Tennessee of Knoxville. He's got about 30,000 students in his campus. He's got 53 police officers using body cameras. We then go into Jimmy, who's over at University of Georgia. He's got about 30,000 kids. He's got 89 officers using theirs. And of course, my agency, we rolled out with 15 police officers initially with our camera system. So let's talk about what these chiefs really liked about the body cameras as they implemented these systems. Dan Williams, a smaller agency, implemented in 2011. What he liked about it was ease of use, download onto an internal system, and picture quality. So what he's saying is that when the camera he's using, let me go back to that camera so you can see. The camera he's using is this one right here on the right. It only has one button on it. You flip it down and it starts recording. You flip it up and it stops recording. And they download their system right onto their server. And he says he likes the picture quality of that unit. Troy Lane, who's also using the same type of system, says that he's been able to reduce time spent on complaints, lessens complaints, because people know that they're being recorded. Officers don't use profanity as much. Helps with public relations and helps with court negotiation. Jimmy says that, again, it reduces court times. Jurors said it's been great. Great with complaints. So let's talk a little bit about juries and rolling the system out into your community. One of the first things you want to do within your community when you roll this system out to it is you want to educate your community on what can and can't be done with this system. That's a very important thing. So people in their mind have a perception of what the body camera will be able to do, and oftentimes the body camera won't be able to do that. Okay, and so I just, they think that the audio quality is going to be perfect. They think that it can see at night. They think that it can have a 360 view. And there's just some limitations on this body camera. So we have to have a conversation with our jurors and with our community on, okay, yes, this is a great tool, but the officer's word is still an important piece to this. Some cons of it, field of view is not as wide as they would like. Sometimes the sound quality isn't very clear. Clips are cheap, and night ability is poor. So let's talk for a minute about night ability. So as cameras roll out, we begin to see cameras roll out that have really, really solid night ability and can see in the dark. Let me tell you the problem with that. When you take a camera system and you mount it on a police officer, and that camera system can see more than what the human eye and the natural eye can see, when that officer goes to court, he has to be able to justify what the camera could see and what he could not. So if the officer is in a low visibility light situation and he sees what he thinks to be a gun, and he takes a shot, But the camera, has night vision and can see through the night, clearly shows that that is a cell phone and not a gun. You can't take away what the jury sees. So when you play that video and the jury sees that, you can't take that back. And so this is an important piece to remember, that night visibility may not be the way you want to go with your system. The cost of these units, so let's be honest about the cost. When these units first came out, we were talking about $1,200. Taser rolled out their unit at $299, and their units up to about $399 now. So the cost of units isn't great. It's cheaper than the firearm that you're carrying. It's cheaper than the taser that you're carrying. It's cheaper than the radio that you're carrying. So the cost of the unit is not great. Where the cost is in storage. So the reason that Taser rolled out their camera for such a cheap price is because they packaged their unit with a storage system that you're going to pay for. So we'll talk about storage in a little bit. So just kind of keep that in your mind. Jimmy did this thing where he bought multiple types of mounts for his units, and I'll show you. When we get to the slide picture, I'll show you some pictures of the mounts that Jimmy used for his system. And so he would let him mount them on the shoulder, on the head, or on the lapel, and all over the place. And so he found that really he just needed to go into a one mounting system, so they didn't have all kinds of different kinds of mounts floating around all over there. Also, one of the cons is, and it's going to be a con throughout having them until there's a change, and we'll talk about some changes that are coming. But one of the cons is that the system requires the officer to activate it. So sometimes officers don't. Sometimes officers are chasing people and they don't have time to activate a camera. Sometimes officers go to flip on their overhead lights and somebody jumps out and starts shooting at them. They don't have time to do those things. So it's a con. It's something you need to think about, something you need to recognize. And as time progresses, we will see changes, and those things are going to become auto-activated by overhead lights and things like that. But just something to remember. Lifespan of the units, so we've had ours at Furman since 2013, and the lifespan, I would say, is about 2 years. You might as well just factor in 2 years. Troy's getting 4 years out of his, but battery life starts decreasing after about 2 years. Officer response to camera. Now, I'll just speak directly. You'll see some of the responses from the other chiefs, but I'll just speak directly to us. We had 2 or 3 officers that thought it was a great idea. They were really supportive of it. We had 2 or 3 officers that were absolutely adamantly opposed to it, and the rest of our officers were pretty neutral in that. And so I think what has happened over time is the officers who were adamantly opposed to it actually have become dependent on the camera system. They love the camera system. They want the camera system, and they really like the camera system. So we've seen a really positive change for the better for us in this camera system, that we're able to use it. Officers really get buy-in, especially after the first couple times that an officer is exonerated from a complaint and the chief can push that complaint back on the complainant. Officers really get behind this system. Student and staff and community response to these things. I think the community really likes the camera system itself. I think that the community supports it and approves it. There has to be good policies, good release policies, record retention policies, and redaction policies. You have to think about redacting things. What happens when somebody does a public records request for a camera footage of you interviewing a rape victim? What happens when someone does, just all different kinds of issues that might come up with public records in these cameras. So we just have to keep that in mind. I think that's some of the community's fear, is that all of a sudden we got video footage of police officers out on the scene on these situations that are very, private, and now that private situation is becoming public. But you know what? My officer safety outweighs that, and the allegations that are coming against police officers, we'll accept that you called us to come out to you, and we're going to document what happened accurately there. Let's talk about funding and costs for body cameras. So some states are coming out with funding, and they're paying for it for you. But let's say you don't have a state that's doing that. The funding is not the camera. The funding is the server. So we're seeing that with the server cost, you're looking at about $1,000 a unit, about $1,000 a person, maybe just shy of that, maybe $800. So Taser, how I do it, is I paid $15,000 up front for our cameras, and the equipment that goes along with that. And then Taser charges me $4,000 a year to maintain and manage our data. And so our officers come in, they plug their units in and downloads the data, and that's it. And we don't have anything else beyond that. These other chiefs went ahead and did an internal system where the officers move the files over and internally stores that. And they were paying about $60,000, $40,000 to $60,000 for it, depending on how much storage you want. One of the problems I have with that is, first off, IT infrastructure. You want to make sure you have a solid IT infrastructure. Also, I don't want officers to have to deal with moving files over or have the ability to delete files. I want this to be an automatic thing, and officers can easily move it over, and they don't have to think about it. And that's why I stuck with that system. Policies. A lot of chiefs have told us that they initially give their officers the option on when to turn their camera on, when they want to activate, those kinds of things. We have found that the changes that we have seen have all been around mounting location and activation times. And so most chiefs are now saying if you're going on a call for service, you're going to activate that. If you're being dispatched to a call for service, you're going to activate your camera. And so that's what we're really seeing. Record retention. That's a state law specific thing for many places. And so most places are just going to go off their state law specific record retention rates. That's one of the reasons we really like the evidence.com feature for us as a university, because when the officer downloads that, they can then classify the video that they downloaded and just do record retention that way. But other agencies, they have to write into their programming, how long do you keep a video? So let's say I went over and helped Miss Mary Emma get her cat out of her tree. How long do I need to keep that video? That's going to take up memory space in my server. How long do I need to keep that video? And so I would say most places are keeping those kinds of videos 30 to 90 days, with keeping crime videos much longer, sometimes indefinitely. Let's talk about some funding. When things started to roll out, December 1st of 2014, President Obama announced that there's going to be $75 million for body cameras. About 18 days later, Congress said we're not going to fund that. So DOJ came back and said, you know what, we can't do the $75 million, but we're going to do the $20 million. And what does $20 million get us? About 50 agencies throughout the United States. So when we're talking about funding, we might as well just assume that the agencies are probably going to have to self-fund. Even with that $20 million, agencies still had to do a 50% of self-funding themselves to get that grant money. One of the biggest studies that was done was a study done in California of a town that had a population of about 100,000 people. It had 115 police officers in the agency, so we would call that a mid-sized agency. So that's why we really like this study. They had about 500 violent crimes a year. Out of those 500 violent crimes a year, 24 citizen complaints occurred before the trial. After the trial, it was reduced down to 3 citizen complaints. There was a 63% reduction in the use of force encounters. Now, something you have to remember about this specific trial is that through this process, every single crime type and all encounters with citizens were recorded. The officers basically turned their cameras on at the start of their shift and turned them off at the end of their shift. And that's something that you have to remember. But what we did see is that without the body cameras, the use of force they used force twice as often as when they were using body cameras. So they drastically reduced it from For every 1,000 encounters they had with the citizens, 0.7% of the time they had to use force. It went down to 0.07% of the time they had to use force. And why that's important is it's great for the community, right? So it's great for people who are being arrested that they don't have to have force used against them. We like that. But the truth is that someone makes that decision to have force used against them. The police officer isn't forcing them to have that happen. That's just something that happens. So because of the actions that they take, what we like about this as law enforcement is that we reduce the times that we have to use force, which means we reduce the times that we enter into a situation where we may be injured and hurt as law enforcement officers. So we really like that. So here's a question. Do we announce that we are recording to the people that we're recording? Here's what we know, is that most species alter their behavior once they're aware that they're being observed. So in this study, the police officers would announce to everyone that they were being recorded. Now, in some states, you have to announce. You don't have a choice because it's a one-party state. That means that only one party, in a one-party state, only one party in a one-party state, one party has to know that you're being recorded. The other party doesn't. So like in Ohio, I can record you and not tell you that I'm recording you. I'm allowed to do that. That's not illegal. In D.C., that's not the case. In D.C., both people everyone that's being recorded has to know they're being recorded, or there has to be some type of warrant issued to record someone without their knowledge, okay? So in this case, they didn't have to announce that they were recording, but they chose to announce that they were recording. And we believe that changed behavior. Of course, it changed the behavior of the officer because the officer knows that he's being recorded. But it also changes the behavior of the person. And so the question is the reduction in use of force because the officer changed his behavior, or is the reduction in the use of force because the person changed their behavior because they're being recorded? And we don't know from this study what that was. I suspect it's a combination of both, realistically, because the officers always announced when they were recording. Now, the UCLA supports the use of body cameras. They put some cursors. So they put some requirements on those body cameras use. They say, of course, it needs to be deployed with a good policy framework. Hey, we're all agreeing with that. I agree. A good policy framework is very important. It should be used as an oversight tool for the police department. Well, we're actually okay with that, right? We're okay with some oversight in that area. We're using it for a prosecutorial piece. But we can also use it to police oversight so people can review that and see that. Put in place, they recommend that we put in place privacy protections, such as you can't turn the camera on inside of a home without permission. That's crazy, and we're not going to agree with that. Now, there's some states that have some policies on that and say that when you're inside the home, you have to redact that before you release it to the public. But listen, most of our encounters happen inside the home. We need to have that protection for ourselves, that we're inside that home. People are accusing us of assaulting them. People are accusing us of saying things that we didn't say. People are doing all kinds of accusations. We want to make sure that we have the protection for ourselves of what's happening in that home so there's no false allegations. We want the camera for that. This is, they say that officers should turn off the camera if they are interviewing and the person doesn't want to be recorded. Tough luck. You have called the police department. You want us to come over. You've asked for our assistance. When we show up, we are going to record that interview. There's some reasons why we want to record that. We'll get into training reasons after that. But truthfully, for my report to help me with what I'm doing and to protect me as an individual, I'm going to record whether that person wants to be recorded or not. If they don't want to be recorded and they called me for their help, then they can say, I no longer want your help and I will handle this myself. Or if they're a suspect and we were dealing with them, then they don't have a choice. Anytime that they're on call for service involving a crime, it should be on. Most agencies are okay with that. Footage should not be released unless it involved the use of force, a felony arrest, a complaint against a police officer. So what they're saying is, if Mary Lou over here wants to be a complete jerk to the police officers and cuss us out and call us everything in the book, we can't release that because it was to us as a law enforcement. But if we've messed up, if we've had a bad day and we did something inappropriate, that should be released, but not the citizen who's treating us that way. So I don't agree with that either. And UCL ACLU says officers should not be allowed to review videos before writing a report. Now, this is an interesting conversation to have. Now, you would say, Tom, why can't an officer review a video before he writes a report? Now, I let my police officers review the video. It refreshes their memory. It lets them think about things and remember how things happen. But it is an interesting concept from the ACLU, and one that I somewhat understand where they're coming from there, because if we had a witness to a crime, there was video footage of that crime, we would not then go back and allow the person to review video footage before they wrote us a statement. They're a victim of crime. They just need to tell us what they remember. So why are we allowing police officers to do that? I would say because they're writing dozens of reports a day, and sometimes they need their memory refreshed. But it's an interesting concept, and one that I think that should be thought about and discussed. So let's talk about some privacy rights issues, because that comes up all the time with this. In the O'Connor case, we established the reasonable suspicion standard for workplace searches by employers. So if I'm an employer and I have a reasonable suspicion, that is less than probable cause. So what's probable cause? Probable cause is I can actually go out and get a warrant. I can show a judge why I know, or I have probable cause to believe that you have something in your locker. Reasonable suspicion is much less than that. I just need to be able to articulate why I believe it might happen. And so in O'Connor, we have where the court has said, all you need is reasonable suspicion for workplace searches by the employers. And on top of that, and one of the reasons they said that is because there's this thing called an operational necessity doctrine. And what the court was basically saying was, first off, your office really isn't a private place. But on top of that, an employer shouldn't be expected to go and get a warrant every time they want to walk into your office if you don't want them walking to your office. First off, they own that office, and they should be able to walk about and move about freely within their own offices without having to go get a warrant and follow criminal procedures every time. So that kind of sets the stage for is the employer allowed to be in my space and videotape and access video recordings of what I'm doing? This Phillips case says there's no expectation of privacy inside of a cruiser, inside of a police cruiser. So what happened with the police is they said, okay, I get that that's your office space, but this cruiser is my personal space, and I have an expectation of privacy inside my own cruiser. And the Phillips case said, no, the cruiser is an extension of your office, and there is no expectation of privacy inside your office space. As in the Samuels case, if the employer specifically states the expectation of privacy, they can make anything available for inspection, including personal vehicles. So what happened in this case is the employer said, I want to search your car. And the employee said, no, that's my personal car. You're not allowed to search it. The employer said, no, your car is on my property. And in our policy, it says we can search anything you bring onto our property. And in this case, the Supreme Court said, it's not your right you had the choice to not work there. And you understood that was a policy when you started working there. You had the choice not to take that job, but since you did take that job, you now have to abide by it. And in this Allen case, was an interesting case because this is involving the Occupy Wall Street movement, but it ended up happening. It was the Occupy Berkeley, the UC Berkeley School, I believe, and so the judge required that the police officers turn on their video cameras, and the officer turned it off. So it was the first time we actually saw a judge requiring video footage and camera recording, and an officer going against that. So it was just an interesting case to look at. Continuous recording. So a lot of people say, you know what? Why don't we have a police officer turn on their camera at the start of their shift and turn it off at the end of the shift? So let's talk about some problems with that. First off, the FOP, and I agree with them on this, says this creates an oppressive and stressful work environment. You can't have true conversations. You can't just, it's oppressive. Every single thing you're doing is being recorded, that's not a work environment you want to be in. When you're dealing with juveniles, there's some very sensitive things that you don't want to record involving juveniles and confidential informants in particular. Sexual assault and DV victims, you have to think about that. Data storage, the massive amount of data storage that would require if every single police officer recorded every single thing they did. On top of that, we'd get public records requests for entire officer shifts for people to comb through and look for things. And so I just think that it's not a realistic thing. But right now, we don't really even have to think about that or worry about that because we don't have anybody that has a system that can record for 12 continuous hours right now because of battery life issues. So it's not something we have to think about, but it's going to be something that we will eventually think about. So when officers start giving us some pushback, I pulled up the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, did a study on dash camera use. So when dash cameras came out, they kind of looked into that and looked at some of the statistics. And so I think that we can equate a lot of the dash camera statistics with the body camera statistics that we're going to see. The first thing they said is that 97% of the in-car video cases exonerated the officers. That's a pretty big one. Officers were saying, "Oh, we're going to get." This is going to be a massive witch hunt. They're going to be dinging us for saying the F word to somebody. I'm going to get fired. And that wasn't the case at all. 97% of the time, the officers were exonerated. Many complainants dropped their complaint upon learning that there was a video. And only 5% of the complaints were actually just sustained and where they said, you know what, there was something there, but it doesn't mean that the officer was terminated or anything like that, but the complaint was actually found to be true. Random review. So that's a topic that we talk a lot about as administrators. So that officer records, is that recording the officer's personal information? Of course not. He's doing it for the agency. But then the question comes in, do we as supervisors look at that recording randomly throughout the year? My agency does. We look at random review. The supervisors once every 2 weeks, just randomly pull a video that the officer has been involved in, and they review it with that officer and sit down and talk about things that they can improve. Let's talk about camera placement. So this is a helmet mount. So this is called an Axon body camera. And so basically the camera itself is a square device about the size, I'm sorry, not the camera, the battery itself is a square device about the size of a cell phone. And then there's a wire that runs from that battery to the actual camera unit, which is that unit mounted to this officer's head. You can also see it here mounted to his glasses, and then you can see it again here mounted to the baseball cap. Now, some of the feedback we got from these units was a lot of the officers would mount them to their lapels, and that because of doing that, the camera would move up quite a bit and move all over the place. So actually what most agencies that are using this type of camera system do is they do with a direct head mount. This is called it's like a headband that goes around the back of your head. It looks very unstable, but actually the officers that wear it say is very stable. It doesn't move around a lot. The wire does have some issues, and they get weak easily. However, you get notified when the wire is having issues, and you can go get a new wire. So this is the Taser Axon, which has the external camera to it. This is a V-View camera right here, and as you can see with the V-View, there's only one real button, and that's a slide button. If it's slid up and you don't see the green, then it's not recording. If you slide it down, then you see the green and it is recording. So, and then this is the Taser Axon body. This is what my agency uses. It's a self-contained unit. There's a button on the front there. You can push it twice and it starts recording. One of the advantages to most of these units is when you push that button, it actually has a buffer, which means it will go back about 30 seconds and start recording from 30 seconds previous to you activating that button. So that's a nice little buffer. This is another example of a video system that actually has the viewing screen mounted to the back. And so the officer can just sit in their car and actually view what has occurred right there on the camera. So when they're writing their report, they can see it. For the Taser Axon Body, like we have, you can do that using a Bluetooth sync. So your camera will actually sync to your cell phone, and you can go in there and view your video footage. You just can't delete it or alter it. This is a new camera system that's out. It's an interesting one, and this is a front-facing camera. So if you remember all the way back when we talked about camera systems, one of the things I said about them was that all species change their behavior when they know they're being recorded. And so this is an interesting one where the philosophy behind this camera is the person is looking at themselves being recorded, and then that is going to change their behavior. Some people believe that this is going to increase their aggression, but we'll see. This last one, Video Armor, is an interesting one because it's completely a cell phone app. And so within the cell phone app, you have all the features that most body cameras have. But it's a cell phone app. It's like $5. You can download it and you can use it. One of the problems with that is if you're using your cell phone to record this stuff, your cell phone becomes evidence. And so you might lose your cell phone. So it's just something to think about. Here's some ways to store and download your information. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you see there is a docking station for the Taser. On the left is how you downloaded the ViView body camera. Now, what we're seeing most groups go to is all cameras are going to a docking station like the right, so you can just plug it in. It will download that information. Supporting stories. There's a ton of supporting stories. We won't tell a lot of them. I'll kind of skip over that. Video cameras 2.0. What I see in the future, and we're seeing this happen right now. Taser just came out with a live viewing feature for their cameras. It will roll out in the summer. What that means is that during an active shooter, I can tap into that police officer's camera, provided he's connected to Wi-Fi or the internet with that camera, and I can see what is happening in the officers. I can see what's happening live. I can see what's actually going on, what's going down. When we're missing an officer, if an officer is out on a traffic stop and we can't raise him on the radio, we can tap in and see where that officer is at and actually see what he's seeing. Advanced redacting. Redacting is going to become a huge piece. We're going to have to be able to fuzz out people's faces, fuzz out scenarios, fuzz out words, because it involves juveniles and victims and all kinds of things. We just saw this in the Arizona shooting. There's a campus shooting in Arizona where the officer had body camera, and anything involving the suspect, the screen became like a white and black movement screen, so you could see the people's bodies, but you couldn't hear what was being said, and you couldn't see who they were talking to. And then when they weren't dealing with the suspect, it came back on and showed video, true video. Wi-Fi upload. You're not going to see us having to dock our cameras anymore to download. They're just going to upload every time they connect to Wi-Fi. Light bar activation. We're seeing that happen right now. Some places are using Bluetooth. Some places are using just a couple different features. But when they flip on their light bar and activate that, we're seeing their camera automatically come on. Google Glass. We saw some pretty cool stuff going on with that. But Google Glass has kind of moved off the market, so I don't think we're going to see Google Glass involved in body camera recording. Accelerometer. That is a device inside the body camera that when an officer takes off running and starts bouncing and running, the camera automatically turns on. So I actually think that we're going to see some of that implemented into some body cameras. We'll see a lot of false activations, but we'll see some interesting activations, so the officer doesn't have to worry about turning on that body camera. Dispatch activation kind of goes back to live viewing. If a dispatcher can't raise an officer, she can log in and turn on the camera and see. Obviously, there's going to be all kinds of policies that need to be written involving that. And then voice activation. I think at some point in time, we'll be able to see the officer just speak out, camera on, camera off, and he'll be able to activate his camera that way. So with that said, that's some stuff about body cameras. I hope you learned a little bit about it, and that you can kind of kick back and enjoy learning about, that you were able to kick back and enjoy learning about body cameras. And when you go into your agency, you'll have a little bit more knowledge about what's out there in the market, what's available to us in the market, and some of the advantages. Your discussion this week will be centered around body cameras, and I'll be interested to see some of the conversation there. And then your first 3-week project is this week, so you'll get your assignment on what you are going to write about. And this week, what you're going to do is present is make a 12-slide PowerPoint presentation, almost exactly like what I made. You'll have 12 slides, and on each slide you'll have notes on it. So with that said, have a great week. Thank you.